I just got back from watching Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. This may come as a shock to people who don't know me in real life because I don't think I've said anything positive about this movie, and I'm probably not about to say anything now. But I really wanted to see what the movie looked like so that I could make an educated commentary about it. And the thing is that I have the screenplay on my Kindle right now, so I didn't read it before I saw the movie. So I have all of these thoughts, and the screenplay actually kind of confirmed them. So let's start out with, I guess, the vaguely positive, which is that Fantastic Beasts is a really pretty movie. There's a lot of really well done CGI, and the magical scenes are interesting. Um, but there's a lot of fluff, not a lot of substance in terms of the art and just the setting. I mean, it's New York in the 1920s, the late 1920s. So um, I'm pretty sure that the Harlem Renaissance is a thing. And it's something that should have been a thing in the context of that film. And J.K. Rowling decided not to. And I get that she's British and she might not understand that, I don't know, that brown people existed, but kinda didn't. So when I asked my friend Angie about this movie yesterday, and I was like, "Oh well, it's really white, isn't it?" She's like, "Yeah, it's pretty white, but it's less white than expected." So here's the thing: there are background characters of color. There are no crowd scenes that are entirely characters of color, and there are, let me see, 5 black characters who get to talk. I think. Most of the characters of color that appear in this film are silent. The biggest waste was Zoe Kravitz as Lita Lestrange because she only appeared in a moving photo inside of Newt Scamander's trunk, and it was like, oh, she broke your heart, oh, blah blah blah, and it was very, let's pit this character against this character who's wrong, the wrong choice love interest, against Tina, who's this really cute, really sweet white lady. And I get that if you're watching this and you're not familiar with what I write or the content that I cover, you might be like, well, why are you making it about race? And there's an issue in nerdy media, in a lot of media, but mainly nerd focused media, where women of color are constantly framed as wrong choice love interests. I talk about it a bit on one of the posts on my site, where in Daredevil, you have 2 wrong choice love interests for Matt. You have Claire Temple and you have Elektra. Claire is the wrong choice because she is like, yeah, you need to be Daredevil, but you also need a balance. Meanwhile, like, she wants him to keep doing what he's doing. But then you have Elektra who's like, yo, whatever you want, I'm in. But Matt is like, well, what if I stop being Daredevil? That could be a thing. Like, he plans to leave with her. Like, he's ready to give up his mission, you know? And so she's framed as the wrong choice because of that, because of what she inspires in him. So the series has him, at least for the moment, end up with Karen, who is white. She's framed in really, really problematic ways in terms of pitting her white femininity, which is fragile, against Elektra, who is a dragon lady type character, and against Claire, who is frequently desexualized in that narrative. She's never seen outside of her nurse's scrubs. So then the fact that in Fantastic Beasts, the only woman of color that's brought up as a romantic interest for Newt Scamander is, a Lestrange. We know how that family goes. They're not the best people. They're kind of terrible. I feel like that was really messed up. Like, how are you gonna cast Zoe Kravitz in a movie where, I mean, honestly, I knew none of the people in that movie. Like Eddie Redmayne, because he's not my favorite actor at the moment for a certain movie that he did that he shouldn't have, wherein he played a trans woman, and that's not acceptable. I don't even remember the name of the movie because I'm so mad. Ugh. But he was the only actor that I was like, oh yes, this person is an actor who has credits to their name, except for Zoe Kravitz. You know, we know her because she's Lenny Kravitz's daughter, because she was in the X-Men, because whenever movies deign to cast a black woman in anything, it's either her or Tessa Thompson, because, okay, like, I'm not particularly dark skinned, and they are way lighter than me. Like, I mean, and I love them. I love Zoe Kravitz. You know, I was really pissed that she didn't get to do more in the X-Men franchise. You know, and I'm pissed that she's not getting to do more in this franchise, except now that Rowling is like, yes, we're getting sequels to this. She'll probably show up as a bad guy because women of color are frequently framed as the wrong choice for white male leads. Yeah, that's a thing. Um, One of the things, okay, so when I first saw the trailer, because I didn't care, but the trailer was attached to a movie I saw earlier this year, and so you see um, Ezra Miller and Colin Farrell's character standing together in an alley, and I'm like, yes, because I would like to gently kiss both of them a lot. So I was like, okay, well, this could work. Um, well, after seeing the movie, there are a lot of reasons why that can't work. No spoilers, except yes, lots of spoilers. Sorry, I lied. Um, One of the biggest reveals in this film, there are two. One is that Ezra Miller's character, Credence, is actually what has been going around killing all of these people and attacking no matches because Muggle, too difficult, and Americans are apparently too spacey to think of a really cool term that isn't no magic. Um, so Cretans is what has been going around killing people. The other big reveal is that Colin Farrell's character isn't Mr. Graves, but he is actually Grindelwald. You know, the guy that Dumbledore has been burning a flame for like his entire life. Because if you're gay in Rowling's world, you get one love interest, and it's probably unrequited, and you will die alone. Good thing I don't live there. So they have a lot of interactions throughout the film that are very charged. So here's the thing. The first time that you see um, the character of Credence, I'm looking through the audiobook right now. All right. You see there's this character named Mary Lou who basically serves as kind of like an anti-witch version of the Prohibition era people who shut down speakeasies and bars. Like she was very anti-magic. And so Mary Lou has three adopted children: adults Credence, Ezra Miller, and Chastity, and Modesty, who's 8. Right. So throughout the movie, Credence looks really upset, and you find out some things. So I'll get to that in a second. What you find out otherwise about him, but so Credence is, well, he's an adult, but he's also an adult who's been subject to a lot of really horrible things. So I refuse to infantilize the character because of what he's gone through, because that's disgusting. But at the same time, definitely, not only is this almost the 1930s, but you're dealing with mental illness, you're dealing with abuse, you're dealing with this character who's so uncomfortable in his own skin, in his own magic, that he responds by that magic consuming him and attacking people, killing people, right? So Grindelwald as Graves is Credence's basically his only confidant. He has no one else he can talk to, um, and that's a problem. That's a huge problem. So he's manipulated by Graves into looking for this child that Graves is like, this child is so important. You have to find her. If you do, you'll be free. We'll be free. And it's something really important to note here is that a lot of people have been like, oh, well, Dumbledore was gay, but that doesn't mean Grindelwald was. I'm pretty sure Rowling confirmed it, but also she does that thing where you only get one character who is gay in a thing. So yeah. So let me get to the scene. All right. So the first time that we see Credence and Graves together, all right. So that's, I mean, I say the first time, but I'm not quite sure. But it's scene 42, right, at night. The Woolworth building looms ahead. Credence glances toward it with a hint of longing. Graves stands outside, watching Credence intently. Credence spots him, hope flickering across his face. Utterly enthralled, Credence moves across the street towards Graves, barely looking where he's going. Everything else is forgotten. If you interact with me for any period of time, I will inevitably bring up Devin Grayson's Inheritance as a really interesting example of subtext made text. In her novel, she eroticizes the relationship between Dick Grayson, the first Robin and current Nightwing, and several of the older male figures in his life. Regardless of whether it's shippy intentionally or even appropriate, and considering that's the book that kind of got Grayson canned, but it's still there. The language used is the language of romance novels, of eroticism, of desire, and that's what Rowling uses with the interactions between Graves and Credence. All right, throughout the film, whenever Credence and Graves interact, they're very close. Earlier on Twitter, I saw someone say that they kissed, and according to the screenplay, they don't. I have to look through it again, but so far, no kissing. But the thing is that while Credence is an adult, Graves slash Grindelwald is an even older adult. So there's definitely a tone there that's really uncomfortable. So when you have descriptions like so the what's going on, you have here Credence asks Graves, "Do you think I'm a freak?" And Graves responds with, "No, I think you're a very special young man, or I wouldn't have asked you to help me now, would I?" And then the direction, a pause. Graves rests a hand on Credence's arm. The human contact seems to both startle and captivate Credence. So you have this scene, it just feels like Credence is going through an awakening, and unfortunately, it's not the Force awakening here. There's a very flowery language that relates magic to sexuality and blooming, and it's really uncomfortable. It's one of many things throughout this film that I straight up do not like, because Rowling doesn't do well with representation, so that we have on screen our first the closest thing we have to on screen queerness in her series, and it's basically playing into stereotypes about uh, gay men as predators or queer men as predators because bi, pan, and polysexual men don't escape the stigma and this erroneous assumption about their dating habits, you know? So at the end of this scene, um, after Graves asks Credence to find this kid, his tone softens. He's beguiling and comforting, much like the snake and Eve. And he does this mini monologue. There's something else, something I haven't told you. I saw you beside me in New York. You're the one that gains this child's trust. You are the key. I saw this. You want to join the wizarding world. I want those things too, Credence. I want them for you. So find the child, and we'll all be free. He's promising Credence everything. He's promising him a home. He's secretly kind of promising him a family. It's Graves, Credence, and the child, you know? And it's really obvious that he's using him, except to Credence. Um, Scrolling down a little bit further, hold on. Um, keep scrolling. Okay, so there's a scene. So you find out. Okay, one of the things that's really terrible about Fantastic Beasts is the message it has about abuse, in that children in the wizarding world who are abused, um, who hold their magic inward, they try to hide it, develop this thing called an obscurus. I'm not quite sure, and I don't want to lose my page, so I can't go look for it in the screenplay. That lashes out. So it's basically accidental magic taken to its logical extreme. But the thing is that with this movie, Rowling is essentially going, abuse makes you into a monster. That's what she's doing. She's already done it before with Harry, and well, not Harry, but with Voldemort, and showing that unloved children turn into monsters. That's her thing, you know, that, abuse makes you horrible. So you find out that Credence's mother beats him. So he has scars on his hands, and um, he's panicking in this alley. This is scene 79. Um, so Credence is panicking, and Graves, impatient but feigning calm, holds out his hand, suddenly seeming caring, affectionate. Show me. Credence whimpers and cowers, almost backing farther away. Graves gently takes Credence's hand in his own and examines it. The hand is covered in deep red cuts, sore and bleeding. And Graves' response is, "Shh, my child." My boy. Sorry, I didn't say my child. "Shh, my boy. The sooner we find this child, the sooner you can put that pain in the past where it belongs." Graves gently, almost seductively, moves his thumb across the cuts, healing them instantly. Credence stares. Graves seems to make a decision. He puts on an earnest, trustworthy expression as, from his pocket, he produces a chain bearing the symbol of the Deathly Hallows. "I want you to have this, Credence. I would trust very few with it." And then Graves moves close, placing the chain around Credence's neck as he whispers, "Very few." Graves places his hands on either side of Credence's neck, drawing him in, his speech quiet, intimate. "But you're different." Credence is unsure, both nervous of and attracted by Graves's behavior. All right. Then, after he demands that Credence use the symbol to summon him, essentially, he moves even closer to Credence. His face inches from the boy's neck. The effect is both alluring and threatening as he whispers, "Do this, and you will be honored among wizards forever." Graves pulls Credence into a hug, which, with his hand on Credence's neck, seems more controlling than affectionate. Credence, overwhelmed by this seeming affection, closes his eyes and relaxes slightly. Graves slowly backs away, stroking Credence's neck. Credence keeps his eyes closed, longing for the human contact to continue. Listen to me. This is not only the language of fan fiction, of romance novels, of erotica, but it is the language of it's eroticism. It is, in fact, eroticism. But Ty would be out here having a field day with this shit because this is what Rowling wrote into the interactions between these two characters. Of course, he's preying on Credence because he sees this boy who's been abused, and because Rowling, at the very least, subconsciously sees abused children as broken, he is seeing Credence as broken. So he's using him, he's manipulating him. Credence wants affection, he wants love, he wants a family, he wants a place, and Graves is there to give it to him. You know, the neck touch is so homoerotic. Like, I mean, I kept leaning over to my friend who's with me, not at Beta Ray Bob, who's the best person ever, but to another friend that we brought along with us, and I was like, "Okay, are you seeing this?" Like, she didn't, but that's okay. Still pretty gay, but not in a good way, because predatory. Graves is predatory, and I mean, 24 hours ago, I was pretty like, "Yay, I'm gonna ship it," because I thought that this was gonna be like a relatively healthy minion villain relationship, and it is the farthest. Like, we'll see what you AU writers can do in fandom, but I am literally not holding my breath because what Rowling encoded their relationship with, the power imbalance, the manipulation, the building upon decades of, lies and stereotypes used to excuse the abuse of queer men. You can't shake that off. You know, I don't think there's any way to fix this. Um, I don't think there's any reason to want to, kind of. Like I would really like to see other people's takes on this because yes, I am a queer femme. I'm not a dude. I'm not dude aligned. So this, maybe my interpretation, while I don't think it's incorrect, might be lacking, you know, some stuff that I might need. Um, but I also want to look at. I know most of this review is me complaining about this relationship. But next, I want to get to talk about. I want to talk about basically the end of the relationship. The relationship. I gotta stop saying that because it's really not. Um, so you have after Credence in scene 80 something, after he accidentally kills his mother, who is also his abuser, one of his abusers, as evidenced by Graves. Graves basically he assumes that his younger sister is the witch, is the child with all this magical energy, and casts him aside. All right. In fact, he slaps he slaps Credence. He's so angry he slaps Credence, and it's just really fucked up. This is our text. This is our canon. Like look at this. In a contemptuous tone, Graves says, "You're a squib, Credence. I could smell it off you the minute I met you." When Credence is like, "What?" Because his hero is talking to him. Hero is talking to him in this really harsh voice. Um, he just Graves drops the pretension. He drops the illusion of care. He doesn't give a shit about Credence because Credence apparently doesn't have what he wants. You know, he's like disgusting. He says, "I'm done with you." He literally goes, "I'm done with you." And okay, as hot as Colin Farrell is when he is mean in a movie, I was angry because this is not appropriate. This is not even like there's no smoothing that over. It's just ugh, you know. And the thing is that Rowling didn't have to do this. I don't think anyone expected this when she first announced this movie. So Rowling didn't have to turn abused children in the magical community into monsters, excepting of course her golden boy Harry Potter. She didn't have to do that. And I'm assuming in 20 years she's going to be like, "Well, I regret what I did," because that's what Rowling does. And at this point, I'm tired of cutting her slack. It's 2016. You have a world full of magic and and brilliant technology within the magical community. You have a wide stable of characters, none of whom need to be white, none of whom need to be straight, none of them need to be cis, because this is a magical world. And what does she do? She gives us a story in which the main villain is essentially grooming a young adult to do his bidding. And while I disagree with a few people I've seen say, bringing up the term, calling Grindelwald a pedo, it's still not that far off. Because even if Credence is my age, let's just be real. Colin Farrell is he's in his 40s. There's a huge age difference. And this is before we get into the fact that he is Grindelwald and elderly, essentially, because Johnny Depp is far, far from a spring chicken. All right? Let's also talk about that. That they hired someone to play Grindelwald, who is a predator, who's not okay with his significant other, who is just terrible, So they've decided, hey, we want him in our movie. Like I could have figured out how to handle Colin Farrell in later movies had he continued being in it. I can't handle Johnny Depp in later movies, you know. And then not only that, Grindelwald's design is ugly. This is the shallow me talking, shallow Stitch up in here, but he is ugly. He is like it's like looking at the idea of what straight people think queer guys look like. Frosted tips, lisping, the general attitude, because Johnny Depp is terrible. And he's not a good actor. He stopped being a good actor maybe first Pirates of the Caribbean movie at the latest. So there's so many issues on top of the fact that he was horrible to Amber Heard. So many. So many. But let's move to talk about another issue that I've had with this with Rowling and her world building, which is that well, her world building is shit. A lot of people who are New Yorkers who live in New York right now, who were raised in the city, who can trace their ancestry back generations in New York, are like, wow, this is terrible. It's a very outsider point of view of where we live and what the state we've lived in has evolved to be like. And I mean, yeah, I can see it. I mean, it didn't feel like New York. It didn't even feel like we're watching New York through a glass or through a mirror. It just didn't feel like New York at all. And I've been to New York. You know, my sister was born in New York. My mom lived there for 20 years in the 60s, 70s. My dad, you know, went back and forth there also in the 70s. You know, that's where the majority of my family lives right now. I'm New Yorker adjacent. I'm also a historian. I'm reading, I think, Black Gotham right now, which is about the history of Black families in New York, kind of between the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I think that's a book that she should have read at the very least. She should have also done more work on figuring out how people work because I don't. So much is wrong here. Um, I think that now that she retcon stuff in this movie, aside from the, how apparition works in this, um, as far as I remember, doesn't mimic how it works in the Harry Potter text or any description she's given of it. Um, the way that just I hated her. Here's how American magic works because North America, including Canada and Mexico, that's a lot of people. There's a lot of different cultures, a lot of different subcultures, and the only wizarding school in North America is Overmorty. And if I'm pronouncing it wrong, I don't even care because there's no point to it. She'll probably erase it in a couple of years and claim that there are multiple wizarding schools of Hogwarts caliber. But there's this just huge issue where I've never seen something like okay, even the Doctor Who episodes that take place in the US are still recognizably North American, US-y, Canadian-y. This this was kind of crap. And the wizarding world that she unfolds, it's like she gets a kick out of portraying US wizards as really backwards and like yes, there is the instinctive desire to defend the country I was born in, despite the fact that the US is terrible, but what would make England any better? There are multiple references to US wizards being backwards with their relationship with muggles, but we know from her text, from Rowling's actual text, that the same things that these wizards did in the 1930s in the US, they do in 1996 in England. That doesn't change. And yeah, okay, I guess in the upcoming sequels we'll find out that Britain tightens its restrictions or whatever, and Muggles get obliviated often. But, like, I don't I don't even see the point. Um, it's just a mismatch of history and culture, and I just want to look because I just realized that the Deus Ex Machina in the film might have been a Thunderbird. I wasn't really paying. Yes, it was a Thunderbird. And if you paid attention to writers like Debbie Reese, who speaks very passionately and constantly about proper positive representation for Native Americans, in children's media, in media as a whole, um, you and Dr. Adrian Keene, another really great Native thinker, writer, awesome person who criticized, and rightfully so, J.K. Rowling's use of and misuse of Native cultures, plural, because in her initial thing, Rowling framed it as a monolithic Native culture, which is not acceptable. But then she also does that to Africa with its one big wizarding school, and I mean, her. Oh, I will link to Keen, Dr. Keen's and Debbie Reese's writing on this and other Native writers because I think it's actually super important that we look at how Rowling keeps failing. It's the 21st century and she's not getting better. She's not trying harder to represent these people that, you know, she claims to want to represent. Like she's here championing representation, fighting on the fight of the liberal, but it feels very one dimensional because uh, limited access in these films to people of color. If Dylan Miron from Welcome to Night Vale, if he does a video about how long this movie is, if you only have people of color speak, it will be under 3 minutes. I am pretty sure. Saying 1 minute might be pushing it because even though the American president of Wizarding blah 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 is black, and I'll get back to you on that because I have a bone to pick with this, she doesn't get to do much. Graves slash Grindelwald takes the whole scene. He's the one calling a lot of the shots. But yeah, so the Thunderbird is a Deus Ex Machina. That's a thing. She took native an I don't say an artifact, an aspect of of native culture, and I don't know actually. Hold on, because I'm not familiar with the Thunderbird as a cultural mythological creature, but I know that a white guy in England traveling through Egypt isn't going to find one and rescue it. And there's also a hint of the white savior in Newt Scamander that other people probably picked up on, especially when he mentions the little African girl who died because she had an obscurial whatever inside of her, right? And this movie has problems. Um, so let's talk about the Wizarding President, Madam President. She is a light skinned black woman. I'm not sure who she's played by. I will look right now. She's gorgeous. She is, oh my gosh, gorgeous. Um, her hair is held up. She has her wizarding robes on. I enjoy looking at her. She's perfect. But number one, you have the only black women you see in speculative fiction are really light skinned or Lupita Nyong'o under a shit ton of CGI or face paint. And I want representation, but it has to be for everyone. There is no point in casting the same light skinned black women, you know, when you can cast dark skinned women. You can cast other women of color, by the way, because dark skinned women of color, not just black women. Just pointing that out because nobody seems to remember that either. You know, So, alright, let me check this actress's name. She's framed as really aggressive. She doesn't want to listen to any of the white characters. She ends up basically with egg on her face, and she has to require Newt Scamander's help. And I don't like how the character is used. I don't think that it was very competent. Again, Rowling seems dedicated to framing U.S. wizards as complete boobs. They can't do anything right. And I can chalk no small amount of that up to British superiority complexes, but this is a problem that you have these characters and they're all white, and then the ones that aren't white are either behind face paint or CGI, or they get one or two lines, or they're framed as like tertiary bad guys or roadblocks to white characters getting where they're going. All right. So I would like to say, okay, so the actress playing President Serafina Pickery is Carmen Ijojo. I'm really bad at names. I'm so sorry. She's so beautiful. Um, and she played Coretta Scott King twice. Once in 2001 in Boycott, and once in Selma in 2014. So that's pretty neat. So actually, that makes her character kind of even more frustrating because this is who she played next. Look, the movie's pretty. It's gonna add stuff to the canon that's pretty interesting, but it's gonna add a lot of stuff that should never have existed. It's going to strengthen Rowling's repeated push that children who are abused become bad. Voldemort became a monster because his parents didn't love him. You know, Credence became a monster because his parents didn't love him. I'm assuming that we'll get Grindelwald's backstory in about 15 years and we'll find out that he was abused too. Abuse doesn't make you into a monster. You know, that's not how that works. And I hate this is something that I can point at. I would say multiple because Voldemort's mom, she wasn't treated well by her family either. And look what happened to her. Look what she did. You know, look at the Lestranges. Look at Snape. Time and time again in Rowling's work, we're shown that characters who are abused wind up either abusing others or hurting others. And maybe that's not what she intends. I guess I can give her the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, why should we? So if you skip to the end and you're like, well, this was a lot of work, this is a 40-minute long video, and I don't really have time for this, you know, here's some things to keep in mind. In 2016, we had a Harry Potter movie that had not one, but two happily hetero afters. This is also the first Harry Potter movie with a queer, textually queer character on screen in Grindelwald. I'd say one and a half because Credence is also going through the simultaneous magical sexual panic that's tied into Graves / Grindelwald. You know, so we have no queer happy endings in Harry Potter to this day. Two, really whitewashed New York. There are no crowd scenes that are full of black people. And if you honestly think that 1926 New York, that any borough in New York would lack a significant presence of people of color, you're wrong. You are probably one of those people that was like, oh, Agent Carter has to be white because this is 1940s New York. Again, people of color have always existed. They've always existed in places where you may not expect to see them, but the documentation is there. But even if, let's say, people of color, like, let's say Chinese people didn't exist in America until the railroads, or black people didn't exist until the civil rights movement, or slavery, whatever, this is a world with magic. This is a world with dragons, with trolls, with giants. It is a world where you can relive your memory by dipping your face into a pensieve, where you can summon someone from the other side of the world, where an owl carries your mail hundreds of thousands of miles. Nobody cares. This is a world in which the supernatural is natural. But what isn't natural? People of color, queer people, trans people, people who aren't straight, white, cis. And I think that Rowling does herself a disservice by not reaching out to people who can help her shape this world that she cares so much about, because she is doing her fans a disservice. A lot of queer people, a lot of people of color, a lot of trans people grew up with Harry Potter. I grew up with Harry Potter. You know, I read the first book shortly before moving to Florida when I was a small child, and it was important to me. Um, I remember when I was 13, my best friend got me The Order of the Phoenix. I loved that book. That book was my life. My mom would bought me the last two books. She waited in line for me. You know, it was a part of our lives. My nieces are right now watching the movies. You know, for the first time, the youngest niece, Tiny T, she's reading the books, and yet they are not represented. And yes, asking J.K. Rowling to right now write so that everyone exists in her world, that's asking a smidge too much because she is but one person. But as I said, when we first started hearing these little trickles of news about her updated Wizarding World from Pottermore, you know, with the magical schools scattered across the world, outsourcing. There is no problem, no shame in hiring diverse writers to create diverse content. In fact, you will do so much better for it. And it's not going to solve all the problems because you still can't write people of color or queer people, trans people, you suck. But you're giving people representation that they need via your influence and the audience you have built in. And I think that that's something that Rowling needs to consider. I don't think that I will watch another movie in this franchise because it was really disappointing. I'll have to consult with the Nieslings because I tend to do what they want within reason. But I went into that movie kind of expecting this silly romp through the 1920s. I expected Prohibition. I expected the Harlem Renaissance to be glossed over, which it was. I expected wizarding at its earliest period in the Harry Potter universe so far. What I got was a story that framed people who have been hurt as cruel monsters who can't control themselves, who are put down like animals because of the anger that they have inside of them because of their inherent monstrousness due to being abused. I got a movie where Gellert Grindelwald, who is queer, you know, is skeevy towards somebody who's my age. And then he turns into Johnny Depp, which is just disgusting because I hate Johnny Depp. I got a movie where it felt really inauthentic. I can write a better Wizarding World. I know this, and I'm not even in Rowling's league, but I would take the time. And that's the thing, a lot of really talented, diverse writers are out there, and she could have her pick. She could talk to native writers. She could talk to indigenous writers across multiple diasporas. She could fill her world with the kind of diversity that exists in our world. And she chose not to. There's nothing in this book that required that there be a dearth of characters of color, that Grindelwald be either Johnny Depp or kind of predatory. There's nothing in this book that requires two separate, and I say separate because we know that Tina and Newt Scamander end up together because that's his wife. that's the woman he marries later. You know, and then the nomad who also didn't no. Okay, at a later video, some or a later post, I'm going to talk about why the use of the obliviate of memory loss on a wide scale and a small scale is so awful in the Harry Potter series because that's unacceptable too. And it was kind of used to prop up another happily hetero after. And I could do without that. I'm not out here telling you to not watch this movie because I watched it. That would kind of be messed up of me to tell people not to watch a movie that I watched. But maybe don't. Like, if you're like, wow, I don't care about Harry Potter, don't do it, what I did, because you'll just end up really annoyed because she does so many things wrong. And I don't think she either understands or cares that this is what she's given new fans of the franchise. I don't think she cares. I don't think she wants to know. And that's harsh. It is. But I've been reading so many amazing fantasy stories by diverse writers who take the time to research, who take the time to speak to people. And they create worlds where people, if not, maybe I can't see myself in their worlds, but I can see my friends, I can see my neighbors, I can see people that I could walk by in the street, and I think that to paraphrase Mickey Kendall, you know, how if you can't believe in diversity, like really, like you believe in dragons but not diversity. Harry Potter has more dragons than Dragon Age, and maybe less people of color and queer people. No, definitely less queer people.